And whoever knows what's happening up here, can we get his PowerPoint pulled up? I can pretend to know. What's the name of your thing, Eric? Presentations, I got it. Eric and Joe. Eric's PDF? No, that's a PDF. I don't want that. Problem solver. You are relieved. Beautiful.
So how do I follow something like that? I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. But that was an excellent presentation, Joe. And also earlier, excellent presentation from you as well, Leslie. Thank you so much. So first thing y'all might notice, like I am not dressed quite as snazzy as he is. There's a reason for that. I have showed up before in events not dissimilar from this. And I was all excited because I went out and I got like a nice tailored jacket and a tie, it looking all good. And some of the feedback that came from professionals, again, similar, not dissimilar from this audience, was like, oh, Eric is dressed too well and too articulate to represent the people that we help. So I'm there and I'm like, that's sad, because I mean, it really throws me back to a story that's going to lead into frame this whole presentation, which was there was a time where like I was the guy that like wasn't showering for weeks and wasn't shaving and wearing clothes like days at a time, and like that's who I was. And the people who saw me at that time, one was one of the many professionals I've had across the years, told my mom and dad, said, well, this is what to expect from your son now. And that, you know, this is his life from this point forward, is what you see. And truly, I mean, like, not that this is the worst of it, but I do remember this time where it was years before I found meaningful recovery, where I'm at today with things. And I remember just sitting in my apartment, and my mom and dad are over just trying to figure out, you know, what's our son like cognitively now? What's he capable of? What isn't he capable of? And I was hungry, so my mom and dad said, like, well, can you fix yourself something to eat? And when I got a bowl, when I got some cereal and couldn't tell the difference between the milk and the syrup and just poured like a whole bunch of syrup into the bowl, that's where I was at. So when I think of professionals who had told my parents and told me, hey, just keep your expectations low, I guess some of that is coming from lived experience, because sometimes things don't get a whole lot better. But I can't help but think how often low expectations are a thief of progress. I do also believe that unrealistically high expectations are a thief of progress, but if what we're doing walking around when we try to help individuals and families who are interacting with various parts of our systems, criminal justice system, civil justice system, both that I had personal experience with, if what we're doing is just saying, hey, let's just expect that things can't really get much better, what are we doing? Where's the humanity in any of that? So this is titled The Rescue of a Jailed Body and Imprisoned Mind. I think that will make much more sense as I get further into the slides. And you will see here that it says presented by Commissioner Eric W.T. Smith. That is not a typo. Believe it or not, the state of Texas, the Judicial Commission on Mental Health there, they decided to appoint me as commissioner there. And I just couldn't be more grateful. Being at the table and having perspective to be able to share with others, just like y'all here in this room right now, trying to figure out how can we best help people in need? How can we do things that are morally the right thing to do, financially responsible? The right decisions can sometimes save money, especially when we look at the revolving door of things. My goodness, so I'm very grateful to be able to hold that title. Please refer to me as Eric, though. I swore if I ever got myself a cool title in life that I wouldn't be one of those people that was like, I demand you call me by my title. So Eric will do just fine. All right, so who I am. It is quite small on this screen. I'm wondering if I can get it'll work. All right, so right, I am the founder and owner of Eric W.T. Smith Consulting. Right there in the name. I haven't lost business yet, but I can see what you were talking about there, Joe. I'm also on the board of directors for the Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance, and I am a mental health advocate. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I'm like, it's like.
Oh, that didn't work at all. I'm sorry. Does anybody have like Jeopardy music we could play?
Yeah.
Let's do this then.
That'll work.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah. She won the final Jeopardy. Thank you so much for your help. All right, yeah. And I did end up getting a Master of Social Work degree, but the journey leading up to that was anything but, because all of the things you see in these leading bullet points on this slide, it makes it look like there's like this shiny, happy life that I had, and there was just so much of not that before it. So it's true. I'm a high school dropout, former drug addict. As of last month, 19 years sober, so I'm pretty happy about that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that, because we heard earlier today the context of substance use disorder, addiction as it's longer been called, and we hear that and we're like, oh, society sometimes looking at folks like me and being like, just stop making bad decisions. And what I will say is, like, it was definitely my choice to use the drug, to start using it, but from that point forward, I would say like choice was not really much of a factor. I was walking around lying to myself all the time, like, oh, this is going to be the last time I buy this. This is going to be the last time I use this. This is my last hurrah. And I lost count of the number of times I told myself that. So I very much do subscribe to it starts as a choice, but immediately stops becoming one thereafter. So opinions expressed today are my own. All right, so this is one of my favorite slides in here, and the reason that it's my favorite, one of my favorites, is because the whole notion of forced care, the whole notion of coercive care, are people out there with really good intentions saying, don't take people's rights away. Stop taking people's rights away. Wait for them to voluntarily engage. And I'm out there and I'm like, well, I've had years to reflect on things, and I can confidently say that it was not involuntary hospitalization that was the most coercive and forceful thing I've ever experienced, nor was it even jail. It was actually my unmanaged psychosis. And I was not walking around having freedom of any kind. And I can imagine for someone who's never lost touch with reality, that could be a difficult thing to fathom. But for me, very much true. And for others I've met across the years, also true. And I wish that this is something that didn't have to exist. I also wish that colonoscopies didn't have to exist. But just because something is unpleasant doesn't mean there's not a place for it to be medically appropriate, or a place in policy for it to be appropriate. So, right. I apologize for everyone working here in the involuntary and outpatient that I just equated your work to doing a colonoscopy of sorts. But it is true. It's true. Like, just because it's unpleasant doesn't mean it's not necessary. And there were parts of the involuntary care that in San Antonio, the state hospital, there are parts that to this very day, and probably till the day I die, I will say, like, were unnecessary and unjustifiable uses of force. And I went through that. I still have trauma to this day from some of it. But just because there were those things that we need to make better doesn't mean you throw it away. You just put better safeguards in place, better policies, better practices, better checks and balances to make sure the types of things that I went through that were the torture side of things do not happen again. But throwing it all out and saying, no involuntary care, we don't need it. We do need it. I wish we didn't need it, but we do in fact need it. Under what scenario would someone like myself, and this is not made up, the FBI got involved, the Secret Service got involved, police got involved. Under what scenario would someone like me walking around with everyone from these different agencies and police paying attention to me? Not because I'm a criminal, I'm just like becoming very unpredictable. And under what scenario would someone in that mindset be like, you know what? Maybe I'll ease the minds of the FBI and the police society. Maybe I'll just go in and get some mental health treatment. No, I wasn't a whole lot dissimilar from the young man you saw in the presentation shown by Leslie, where it was in the clip, and he was talking articulately, artfully, but he clearly was far gone from reality. And that was what my family and I were running into. I was not voluntarily going to get treatment. No, it was not even on the list that I would have ever created of a list of things to do. So, involuntary hospitalization, AOT, the black robe effect. I'll talk more on these things in later slides, but these things rescued me from being a victim of my own mind, relentless torment that lasted for more than a decade. This is me. I've been saying this for years. This is actually me quoted in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago, April 2024, where I'm saying, like, you can make a strong case that it is coercive, it being involuntary inpatient care or mandated court-mandated outpatient care, that these are people wanting you to do a thing even if you're not totally on board yet. But I was far more a victim of the force and coercion of psychosis and anosognosia than I was of this thing that rescued me, this thing being interdisciplinary teamwork. It was the criminal justice system for me as an entry point after many years of piecemeal psychiatry counseling, individual counseling, family counseling, all of these things not working out. It took the interdisciplinary collaboration and systems working with one another to really make it happen and get me where I'm at today. So People magazine actually did a story on me. This ran in print, and also online. There's a free, shorter version of it, but the print version of this, People magazine 2023, and you may notice here, because we also heard this earlier today, where it was, who's the #1 person often killed from someone in untreated SMI, and I think we heard mother first. People magazine really latched onto this point. You see right here, 12 years ago, Eric Smith believed he was a secret government agent who needed to kill his mother to save the world. And then it goes on to say the rest of, anesthesia and talking about that. But yeah, this is true. Like, I didn't feel the need or want to kill my mom. And in fact, I don't have a history of violence at all. But I also was extremely unpredictable the longer the psychosis was sticking around. And I shudder to think if I didn't get taken into involuntary treatment and step down into AOT thereafter, what would have happened? I honestly, like, it's a dark line of thought that I don't like spending too much time on, and I'm thankful things unfolded as they did. Before I leave this slide, I do want to apologize. Like, this is People magazine, and I am not a model, so there's not an excuse for there to be a full page of my face in a People magazine, but they decided to do that anyhow. And people get so excited, they're like, oh my gosh, Eric, you're in People magazine? People are buying a magazine with you in it? And I'm like, no, people are buying a magazine with Paul Rudd in it, and I just happen to be in those pages somewhere. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because Leslie did a phenomenal job, but what is anosognosia? And I see it as a need to compare it against something that at least there's more general understanding on, not just from a room full of professionals, but to compare it against something that society in general knows something about, and that is denial. So denial, I think of as an unwillingness to admit an illness, an unwillingness to entertain an idea. Anosognosia is an inability to perceive illness. So if I'm talking about what's the difference, one main difference between these two things, we're looking at denial as a matter of willingness or unwillingness, and anosognosia as a matter of ability or disability. And I'm using the context of ability, disability because, I mean, I don't know, just picture somebody who's confined to a wheelchair. Are they just gonna think their way out of it? No, like, they're not in denial, that, like, this is a matter of ability. So similarly, when I was in psychosis and couldn't pick myself out of that metaphorical wheelchair at that point, it wasn't something to think my way out of. I needed interdisciplinary teamwork, I needed to find an effective medication regimen, and I needed a team of people to understand that I was not going to get there voluntarily. I just wasn't. This photo you see right here is the last known photo that I am aware of shortly before, ellipsis. This is my jail booking photo right here. And this jail booking photo really says a lot. I was living out of my car by this time. I actually had a few weeks prior to this photo, I was living with a roommate, and I left everything that I owned there except my car. I took my car with me because I was going to live out of it, because the way I saw it, I was like, the government's going to bankroll my efforts. The government's going to find a way to keep paying me to do what it is that I'm doing. And what it is that I was doing was stopping World War III from happening. I had decoded, well, what I believed had happened was I had decoded codes online that I believed to be assassination attempts being plotted against our then president, Obama, and the Queen of Jordan. And that is why the FBI got involved, because I kept telling them all about this. They met with me on multiple occasions, a few times in a neutral location and also at their headquarters in San Antonio on more than one occasion. And unfortunate for me, you know, they're just doing their due diligence, trying to figure out, do I know anything or what? But the fact that they were giving me any of their time whatsoever, repeatedly at that, in my mind, it was validating every single thing going on in my mind. Why would the FBI keep giving me their time if the things that I was saying were not true? And to be fair, if the FBI didn't give me their time back when all of this was going on, I know my mindset from then. It would have been, oh, they're not giving me their time because they're in on it. There's no way they're going to give me any of their time and try to put a stop to all of these things that I'm looking to uncover. It was a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario if I've ever lived one. And unfortunately, that's the FBI getting involved and then police getting involved. And then once I was hospitalized, the Secret Service coming to pay me a visit. But this jail booking photo, it tells a story. It is not moving, but it tells the story. You will notice I am not looking into the camera. Everything going on was just overstimulation for me. I was trying to look to figure out, like, who are the plants here? Who are the spies from the other countries? I was seeing things that were not there. I was hearing things that were not there. And jail was not a place to get any of that dealt with. As a matter of fact, there was a jail doctor there, and I met with him, and I asked. I said, he asked me, are you on any meds for anything, mental health, mental illness? And I said, yeah. He's like, what are you on? I said, well, here's what I was last prescribed. He goes, oh, we don't have that there. He's like, what else are you on? I'm like, this. He goes like, oh, we don't have that here. And so then it dawned on me why the FBI wanted me there at the jail, which what I believed at the time. Clearly the FBI was not involved. But why the FBI wanted me there at the jail, I thought at that time, was to uncover some sort of conspiracy, and it was up to me to find out what that was. And with the jail doctor telling me, no, we don't have a long list of meds. Here's the few psych meds we do have, and these are the only ones that are available for our inmates here. I was like, that's it. That's why I'm here. That's the conspiracy I'm here to uncover. There's a massive fraud and conspiracy going on from one or two major pharmaceutical companies that are contracted with this jail and potentially other jails that are pushing very specific medications that are being massively marked up. The doctor's going to get the kickbacks. Pharmaceutical companies probably got hundreds of millions in contracts from this. This is one other thing that I'm here to expose. I'm telling that story so you can understand, like, what goes through the mind of someone like me, midst of psychosis, middle of anesthesia. And I can tell you nowhere on that list was, I need to take some medication and get some help. What was top of my list was, got to uncover the conspiracies, got to save the world, got to help the FBI. Now that I'm an asset working with them, I have to do my job. So we're talking, this is truly the concise version of it, but I'll talk about how it went from jail to involuntary hospitalization, and then you'll hear about involuntary hospitalization and next steps thereafter. I mean, for here, I was in jail, and I was thrown in solitary for the bulk of my stay in jail. And you don't have anything like for scale to look up here, but I am all of 5 feet, 8.5 inches tall. And if you're out there wondering in your minds very kindly, like, why the half inch, Eric? Just say 5'8". Because I'm not 6 feet tall, you guys. So the half inch will forever be very important to me. Now, that being said, there I am. I'm in jail, and there's a bunch of truly scary-looking dudes that are, like, all around there. I'm in a jail housed in what we called, like, general pop, but it was for people flagged with mental health issues. And there's truly a bunch of scary-looking dudes in there, but I was the one they were afraid of. And so people didn't feel safe going to sleep around me. They didn't feel safe eating around me. They didn't feel safe being around me. So I got moved to solitary because I was scaring everyone else there. So, just as I'm about to be released from jail, my mom, my dad, they're on the phone with the jail begging them not to release me. Say, what are you going to do? Like this, what's our son going to do? This is the most psychotic he's ever been. You're just going to let him go? And at that time, the jail had told my mom and dad, well, when he gets out, he can panhandle, he can use that money to buy meds and see a doctor, and he can sleep under a bridge. So I don't know about you guys in here, but that is not a solid discharge plan. It's not. And you know what? I don't even want to like blame the jail for this because they have become de facto mental health providers throughout the United States. And how can we blame them for that? That's ridiculous. Like I wouldn't expect, like, let's say a social worker or a counselor to be tasked with being a law enforcement officer. That's not what they're trained to do. I wouldn't expect anyone that's at a jail, even the mental health professionals, I wouldn't expect that environment to be the place where as a society we say, this is where people go when they have mental health issues that aren't addressed until it becomes a crime. And then once they serve their time, let's let them out so that it keeps happening again and keeps happening worse. And then people just become frequent flyers in a system that's not even helping them in the first place. It's even wild to call it a system when it's functioning in the way I've just described. So anyhow, the involuntary hospitalization happened because just as I was about to be released, a judge, we actually saw him in video, he is a friend and fellow commissioner in Texas with me now, a liaison from the hospital. The state hospital was sent to talk with me. And she was just one of the nicest people that I've ever met. And I know I was mid-psychosis at the time, but I still remember her language. Like, there she is talking to me. I'm involuntarily in the cell. She's looking at me through like the glass on the door there in the Bexar County Jail. And she's like, Eric, I was sent here to find out are you really a criminal, or there's energy at the hospital and we're trying to figure out, is that where you belong? Do you need some help? Are you really a criminal? Do you need some help? So I'm sitting there answering her questions like, lady, I don't know who you are, but I'll answer your questions. And just as I was about to be released from the jail for having been there for a month, and I was there on a low-level nonviolent offense of trespassing, I was ordered transferred involuntarily to the hospital. And I was stabilized there for 3 months, released, and immediately placed into assisted outpatient treatment. And the 12 months thereafter was great. In fact, just as I was about to get out of AOT, the Judge Kazin, he says, Eric, you're going to be getting out of AOT soon. What is it you'd like to do? Like, what are your goals? And we heard that earlier when we were talking, like, he asked the person, what are your goals? And I'm like, well, I don't know a whole much about anything other than drugs and alcohol. Maybe I'll be a drug and alcohol counselor. So he looks over at my social worker who's there at the AOT hearing, and Judge looks at him and goes, hey, you're going to make some time to take Eric to the college, gets his questions answered about this chemical dependency counseling program, get the questions answered about how to get disability accommodations, but make sure you take out a whole day, and you're going to take Eric up to the school to do this. And so that's what happened. I got taken up there. I got into the school, into that program. Unfortunately, though, after not long thereafter, the meds that I was on stopped working. So I was involuntarily taken back to the hospital to a second time. And this is a fun factor. We can't say this for certain, but going into my second hospitalization, I was transported by police in an unmarked white car, not wearing police uniforms. And when I eventually saw the documentary, the Ernie and Joe's documentary, The Crisis Cops, I remember sitting there in my room and I'm like, man, those guys look just like the guys that took me into my second hospitalization. And what is it, a 50% chance, right? Because there were 4 guys, two teams of two. There was a 50% chance that it was actually Joe who took me into the hospital. I'm actually closer to, I'm approaching north of 90%, because when I saw the documentary, I was like, man, he looks familiar. So nice full circle moment right there. But anyhow, I'm there, and like I remember the whole scenario. The 2 police showed up. I didn't even really know they were police. They identified themselves, but like I didn't see a gun. I don't. In the case you needed one was like tucked in, and you wouldn't have needed it though. But it's there, and you had the police there. They had their badges, and I remember just having great conversation. And it was a lot of what you heard from Joe a little earlier, which was like he was really having peaceful conversation. He's like, "Look, Eric, we'd like to take you to get some help. We don't have to put you in handcuffs. You haven't broken any crimes. We just need to talk to you about the value of getting help with where you're at right now. Your parents are very concerned. The treatment team that you had with AOT is very concerned because Judge Kazin had already been involved. My parents, in fact, called Judge Kazin to help put the wheels in motion. And so, yeah, I remember seeing the 2 police show up, and I was taken to a hospital for a second time. Stabilized for 3 months, released. Several weeks later, my meds stopped working again. So I'm hospitalized for a third and final time, this time for 4.5 months. And as I'm telling this to you, you guys might be thinking, or maybe not, I don't want to guess, but some of you might be thinking, well, hey, is this really working if you just had 3 inpatient stays, 2 that were 3 months long, and a third that was 4.5 months long? And is AOT even really working? If you went there and you were in it a first time, back to the hospital, in it a second time, back in the hospital, and in it a third time that led to things finally getting better. Does the involuntary hospitalization, does the AOT work? Yes. I was not put back into a hospital because I stopped taking my meds. I was not put back into a hospital for anything along those lines. AOT got me to a point where I wanted to be actively involved in my treatment, but I was not yet able to do so without having a team of people around me, because I was sort of straddling the fence of reality on one side and anything that wasn't reality on the other. So, AOT effective. I think about people who are looking at metrics, looking at numbers, trying to summarize. Is a program effective? Should we keep giving it more money, or should we not? And outcomes, this is a real thing. Was I hospitalized again? Yes. Was I hospitalized another time after that? Yes. Was I in AOT once and then again and then again? Yes. that doesn't mean it's a failure. And, I've had years to reflect on this. And there are people who are diagnosed with cancer, for example, and, they're meeting with their doctor, and they're like, okay, what's the treatment? What's the prognosis? What's the likelihood that I beat this? And depending how advanced it is, the doctor might say, well, we can try our best, but maybe you've got like a 10 to 15% chance of survival. And we then don't, as a society, say, oh, let's just cut our losses and let them die. If the best treatment that we have available is 10 to 15%, that is what we do. Now, AOT is way more effective than 10 to 15% by many different metrics. So it always bothers me when people say, like, Eric, but you were hospitalized more than once and in AOT more than once. Doesn't that just mean it doesn't work? No, that is not the big picture at all. It definitely worked, and if not for me being in AOT and also known into the hospital, I would not have been able to be brought into the hospital as swiftly as I was. Who in here thinks that there's no wait times when it comes for a psych bed? Oh, good, no arms went up. That means you know what you're doing. Right, yeah, no, it's exactly like that. So the fact that I was able to be prioritized and brought into the hospital as soon as I was identified as being in crisis and that second a bed opened up, that is what happened. That's what happens when the judge gets to work with my parents and the social worker and my treatment team and the psychiatrist. Everybody's in communication. Now, you would be right to ask yourselves, morally, philosophically, ethically, should we be able to prioritize someone for a bed and put them towards the top of the list? And I'm telling you, we already do that as a society. If you find yourself in an ER scenario and you're going in and you've got a broken leg, and then I don't know, let's say some terrible event, multi-car pileup happens, and a bunch of other people come in there, lacerations, bleeding out, whatever. Your broken bone doesn't not matter anymore. It just means someone else has been identified, known as needing a higher level of treatment as quickly as possible. So they'll get to you. It's just someone else has been identified as having a higher level of need. That is what happened with me. One of the major benefits that is one of the reasons I'm even still alive and breathing and here standing before you today was a judge and a psychiatrist saying, okay, bed opens up, Eric's got to go in now. None of this 6 months waiting for a bed, 1 year waiting for a bed. None of this unnecessary extended periods of time and untreated psychosis. We got to get him in here now. We're familiar with him. We know what's going on. We got to get him in here now. And when I hear things that reflect the dangerousness standard, which varies by language and practice across some geographic areas, I hear this thing of like, yeah, but is this person posing an immediate danger to themselves or others? And I would love if like any doctor would ever be able to stand up and say, yeah, untreated psychosis is not a danger to self. How is that not already meeting the dangerousness standard? I mean, if it cannot be seen that untreated psychosis is danger to self, I feel like we are missing what psychosis actually is. If we continue to treat it like that, what we are tacitly doing is saying that an individual experiencing psychosis has some sort of behavioral, moral, character, personality flaw. And that's not what it is. There is something medical going on. It is a crisis, and we need to see it as such. I mentioned how I got from involuntary hospitalization into assisted outpatient treatment, although I did want to highlight 2 points right here, which was touched on by Leslie earlier. Motivating an adult with mental illness who struggles with voluntary treatment adherence, that was me to start with, to fully engaging with a treatment plan, which was me until I got to where I'm at now in meaningful recovery. And focusing the attention of treatment providers on the need to work diligently to keep the person engaged in effective treatment. Now, I don't have the words on this slide, but I do want to, 2 terms that sound similar. There is a multidisciplinary approach and there is an interdisciplinary approach. AOT, as I experienced it, is an interdisciplinary approach. It was not a doctor here and a counselor here and a psychiatrist here and an attorney here. It was people coming together and working together. And I, for the longest time, kept calling it multidisciplinary because I did not understand the difference. But looking back in my life, I'm like, okay, I get it. There was, prior to everything starting to go well in my life, I had seen a psychiatrist. I had gone to counseling. I had been before a judge for trying to get my license not revoked by the state of Texas, which is another story. And my driver's license, that is. And all of these different things had their like own inherent value and their own purpose to serve within society. But it wasn't until the different pieces of the system, the different professionals started working together that things really started to work around. So I'm not here to critique if what you do in your line of work currently looks more multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. I am here to respectfully suggest that if there is room for more interdisciplinary collaboration, that is, and to use a very cliched phrase, greater than the sum of its parts. If you can take the valued perspective and expertise and knowledge from different professionals, from different stakeholders, including the person to the greatest extent possible, like myself, once I was able to have my toes kind of dipped in some of reality, if people can work together, way more value, way more value. We also talked a little bit about this earlier, not a pop quiz. This is 2 rooms that you see here. One is very clearly a courtroom. The other appears to be something of a small conference room. And I'll just ask you guys, you know, you don't have to raise your hands, it's just stuff for you to think about. Which of these rooms do you think best decriminalizes mental illness? And I will tell you that the room that you see, the 2 gentlemen standing up, one of them happens to be Judge Kazin, that is not any room. That is the exact room that my AOT hearings were held in. People around the table, and it was nice. Everything about it was nice. I loved going there, and I loved meeting with the team. I love the conversations that we had. And I'm not saying that if y'all are doing anything ever in a courtroom that somehow that's wrong. I'm just saying that if we're trying to get an individual to invest in their own treatment and see themselves through a human lens, it's not like that can't be done in a courtroom, but is it absolutely necessary? And that's the question that I ask. So continue to do as you do, but I hope that you ask questions. If any of you are still on the fence about, well, shouldn't it be in a courtroom because it's a formal hearing? Well, it is a formal hearing, but does it need to be is the question that I'm asking. And I stand here today as a product of someone who had my AOT hearings in a very small conference room. And I found it to be especially effective, especially valuable. And the few times I had been in court before, I can tell you that like I walk into that room and before I even walk in the doors of the court building, my heart's like boom, 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 boom. Because it's a courthouse. There's judges, there's police. Everything looks like it's stress, every direction that I look. But not here, not in the AOT room, not in that hearing. I also do want to point out that the waiting room that we had for the AOT hearing there in Bexar County, there in San Antonio, as soon as we got there, donuts, muffins, orange juice, movie playing on a TV while we waited. And as y'all are thinking that, you're like, oh, right, but what about, like, isn't that expensive? And I will tell you it is way less expensive, as I've talked with the people involved who made the decisions to purchase those things, to just have some sort of relatively inexpensive incentive for people to show up and wake up that day and be like, well, I do have to go to an AOT hearing, but also donuts, a movie, orange juice, and all this stuff I'm not even going to have to pay for. I'm going to go do the thing. So the number of people that did not show up for AOT hearings, at least when I was in the program for the 3 times I was in it, everybody showed up. Everybody showed up. They walked in there. We kind of got to know each other very well, for the folks that were on it for usually 12 months or longer until people were discharged out of it. We get to know each other. So we get to relax with one another, eat some donuts, make some friends. Don't feel isolated in a world that for someone who finds themselves in AOT, for some period of time, there has been some level of isolation, if not high degrees of isolation. So there was like the social atmosphere for us to informally talk and get along with one another, in addition to having these things that made us want to go there in the first place. And then in the conference room, it was a treatment team ready for conversation with me, with fellow AOT participants about our challenges, about our goals, and everything about it was a positive experience in the AOT hearings. Every single part of it. The only asterisk I can put on that is like I am not a morning person, and so sometimes the social worker would come by at like 7:30 in the morning to pick me up to go. I wasn't a fan of that, but you know why? I got up and I was like, well, all right. One, by that point I already had interest in taking meds and investing in my treatment, and also donuts, muffins, orange juice, and a movie playing on TV. All right, very simple. As far as the AOT court hearings and for AOT participants, just take our meds as prescribed, show up to the hearings as ordered, and it started 1 hearing per week, and that frequency diminished over time. And we talked about this briefly earlier today, but these are the main points as I saw and experienced it. The purpose of these hearings: to confirm I no longer required hospitalization anymore, to help decide whether or not I can move to less frequent hearings, and to prepare me for reintegration back into society without need for a court order. We have talked about teamwork and understanding SMI-related needs all throughout today. And I will again emphasize this point in blue at the bottom of the slide. Thoughtful interdisciplinary teamwork is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, all of you have eyes, but I want to just put in summary here. The before and after of the involuntary hospitalization, which was a result of being moved there from the criminal justice system, then being moved to civil court ordered, and then finding the effective med regimen for me. So the before and after are very different trajectories. The before, chock full of problems, challenges that my parents spent 10 plus years of their lives, some of the best years of their lives as individuals, and some of the healthiest younger years of their lives as a married couple, just trying to help me get to a point where I could, again, become some form of functioning, happy, meaningful individual living whatever a productive life meant to me, without being a wear and tear on them and also on kind of society in general, if I'm being honest. And so once all of these things end up working together, we see the after, which is going back to school, restoring relationships, pursuing goals, setting and achieving goals. And you heard me say at the start of this presentation that low expectations are a thief of progress, but so are unrealistically high expectations. And I really feel like one of the best approaches that I will forever learn and model things after came from Judge Kazin and that AOT treatment team, which is this: set goals, achieve goals, aim higher, repeat. And if you want someone to feel like they can accomplish goals, don't set the bar way up here, and also don't put the bar way down here. If you can realistically meet somebody where they're at, as a team, interdisciplinary, thoughtful collaboration, and come up with what would be like the slightly higher, next highest goal we could accomplish right now that someone could buy into, that they believe they can accomplish, let's do that. Let's do it. And it was very effective for me, and it's largely the reason why I am living a very happy life right now. So what can happen in Iowa if you work together to rescue jailed bodies and imprisoned minds? I'm asking that question because how many others in the state of Iowa are there right now, just like me, where if they can get into effective treatment and not have to wait 1 year, 2 years to get the treatment it is they need, and not have to wait for the systems and different professions and stakeholders to start working together, how many other success stories out there right now? I am not a unicorn. I am not an accident. I am the result of individuals, of doctors, of judges, of all of the relevant professionals that you can think of that are also sitting here in this room, working together. And there are others like me right now in Iowa waiting for that type of interdisciplinary teamwork. Perfect. All right, thank you to the wonderful people of Iowa. Please feel free to take a snap of this slide right here. Top is my email address, bottom is my website, and I look forward to questions and comments, some of which I think Joe and I are both going to get right now if people do have questions. And that's it. Thank you. Joe.
All right, good.
You did? I'm sorry. I thought you said you did.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a personal question, Eric, but you were pretty open in your presentation, so hopefully it's appropriate. Have you had any events where you maybe were starting to decompensate since you got stable?
Not since. Oh, thank you for the reminder. Yes. It's a great question. And the way that I respond to that, because I have gotten that thoughtful question before, is I don't have anything like that that rises to the level of clinical concern. I have of a non-clinical concern for the last 10 plus years. Like I do walk around with higher levels of energy, but a lot of that is really not concerning to my psychiatrist, who I've had for more than 10 years now. It's now just got to a point where I wake up so happy to be able to live the life that I live and help others. Like I wake up and I'm like, I get to do this. And when my head hits the pillow at night, I'm like, I got to do that. As far as symptoms, I don't really get any of the detachment from reality stuff. What I do get, for example, is like, let's say when I'm out at the grocery store and if I'll catch eye contact with someone, I'll remember, I'm like, oh, if this was 2008, 2009, 2010, I would have thought like they can hear my thoughts and I can hear theirs, whatever. So I get echoes of remembering what it would have been like. Okay. It's not the true detachment from reality. It's more just recognition of like, oh, in this scenario, I remember what I would have been feeling or thinking.
I understand. So would you attribute your stability to the appropriate medication or a combination of everything? Because it's just so many of our patients struggle when they do have a history of psychosis with stabilization for long periods of time. And often it's because the medications, either they acclimate on them or it changes, the medications change with prescribers like you were talking about. So I'm just wondering, for you, how do you view it? What's made you be the most stable, the combination?
So it very much is a combination, and I do want to point out, I mean, I've talked with parents. Leslie's is an example of this, where there are parents, they have just endless love for their loved ones, and they want the best, and they want their loved one to get better. My mom and my dad, same, endless love for me, but I think they got to a point where they realized love is not a substitute for the type of things. It would definitely helped all along the way, and still continues to be vital in my life to know that they love and support me, my ambitions, my dreams, my goals. But if it was just that easy, just like loving a person would make it better, we wouldn't need psychiatry, we wouldn't need counseling, we wouldn't need involuntary hospitalization, we wouldn't need any of that. So it was definitely a combination of things. And I didn't want to leave off the list. 50%, it was either Joe and his partner or a different team. It's all of the things working together to get someone like me to just buy in just enough that we can get to that next step. And it's one of those things that's easier said than done, but I do also want to point out, because I don't know if it's been talked about, the value of, this is not me pushing one specific med, I'll use the generic name, clozapine, which is the med that I'm on. And prior to being put on clozapine, it was 10 plus years of every other antipsychotic that exists, every SSRI, antidepressant, benzo, sleep med, things used off label, everything every psychiatrist could think of that was not clozapine. Why? Because all along the way, my parents and I were being told, Eric, you're not a great candidate for clozapine. And my parents are like, why? And I'm like, why? And they're saying, well, because the people who take clozapine, they have to take the meds as prescribed every day. That's not what you do, Eric. Sometimes you skip a few days. So I was being judged for 10 plus years based on the person that I was, rather than the person I would become once on clozapine. So then the catch-22 here, or the irony is, when I finally got put on clozapine, I became the person that would be viewed as a good candidate for clozapine.
Well, I have a quick question for you, Joe. So it seems like with your trainings that you've done, and you've done so many of them with law enforcement, what advice or what do you do when you come across law enforcement officers who are resistant, reluctant? It seems like we have a lot of that well, not a lot of it, but depending on what county you're in. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody about the sheriff who's like, this isn't ever gonna happen in my jail in terms of like some medication-assisted treatment. So what recommendations, I assume it's motivational interviewing kind of techniques, but what do you suggest for that?
Yeah, first of all, those are my favorite ones. So I think for a lot of law enforcement officers, and this is like true story, a lot of them are reluctant to come in because usually two reasons. One, anything new or unknown is scary. Or two, what we've really found is that the ones most resistant to mental health training have been personally affected by it in their own families, and so now they're like, hot stove, don't touch. And here's the other reality is that and this isn't like a selfish plug right now, but truly, as someone that now is fortunate to travel North America and provide this type of service, it is so often that I hear from people that we train that like, this is nothing like we got any other time. This is nothing like, and so I think the mental health training gets a bad rap because historically it hasn't been very good. Whether it's done from, and I don't want to talk around this. Even when we started CIT in San Antonio back in 2003, we were learning, we didn't know at the time, but we brought in psychiatrists to come and teach certain blocks during the class. Well, we were talking to 70 first responders, and a psychiatrist is talking as if he's teaching an MD level program. There's just a glaze like, what the hell, man? Like, what? I cannot connect to this. And so we quickly realized that like who's delivering the message matters. And if the audience can't connect to the deliverer of the message, they're going to shut out whatever's being said. Our largest client is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so every federal prison falls under us. All the psychologists come through the training. And at first they were kind of threatened by it of like, we already do all this. And I'm like, cool. Like, I love it. This is just going to be an add-on. But they themselves got frustrated because we would do something like ACEs, for example, one of the classes we teach. And the correctional staff is like, oh my God, I've never heard of this before. This is the greatest thing ever. And the psychologist is like, what are you talking about? Like, we just talked about this last week. And they're like, I've never heard this in my life. So when it's coming from someone, either A, that they expect it to come from, or B, that they don't listen to, or for whatever reason, they're going to shut out whatever's being said. So it's got to be, the content has to be good, who's delivering it has to matter, and that's where there's most drop-offs. And then honestly, I don't want to make a super blanket statement, but a lot of cops struggle with a lot of insecurities. And it's typically a patriarchal organization. It's predominantly men. We've got like 13% women, maybe 15% now. And there's a lot of guys that get into this profession that are masking a lot of things. And now you've got this like power and authority over people. And so when you try to bring in like this empathetic human side, relational side of policing, there's this natural like, whoa, I don't want to do that because that's dangerous. You're going to get me killed. And so, again, we work through that. I tell people I punch them in their throat and then I coddle them and tell them it's going to be okay. But truly, it's like you have to have someone that's able and willing to like push the envelope, do the hard thing. I would love to meet the sheriff that's like, not in my jail. And it's like, okay. Those people excite me. They have not been challenged to think other than the archaic way that they've always done it. So, yeah, that's how we deal with it.
I'm glad you asked that question, Lori, because I had a similar one to piggyback off of it. As a clinician, and I think of clinician spaces and biases, and I love that example of how many people, it totally makes sense. They walk in the room like, this guy's not going to teach me anything that I don't know, and the other disconnect. Now, from your presentation, you had indicated the seemingly opportunities for your type of training outside of law enforcement. So my question actually has nothing to do with law enforcement. It has to do with the other folks. And I'm curious if you could talk about in Iowa specifically, your observations of the apparent need in those more clinical spaces. And even if kind of permission to throw some shade at those spaces where we may like to presume that because they're clinically based or informed, or they have licensed clinicians there, the degree to which we still miss the mark, even unintentionally, to loop it all around, in a sense, how much value is there for your training in non-law enforcement spaces, and how has your experience in Iowa informed what we could use in those spaces here?
Yeah, no, I love the question, and there's a huge need. And I will say, as I mentioned, we started out just with law enforcement, and then it grew. So because you lofted the opportunity to throw shade, here it is. Coming from San Antonio, right? When in San Antonio, right, 7th largest city in the country, anytime I heard, because of my experience, my frame of reference was when someone says they're a clinician, they have a master's degree and a license. And so when we first started coming to Iowa and working with the clinicians, I heard clinician a lot. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And we did a training. We did a 2-day training because we thought like they already know a whole bunch. They're coming in with a great baseline. We're good to go. We're just going to ramp up skills. And then we learned very quickly that like, wait a minute, how do they not know? Like, how is this clinician saying she's never heard of schizoaffective disorder? How is this clinician? And then we're like, we quickly learned that to use the word clinician here, you have a 4-year degree in something, but you work at a behavioral health facility and you just anointed yourself. And I wish I was kind of kidding, but it was a wild thing. And this was probably, 5 years ago at this point now, where I was just shocked. And my team was like, we were like, dude, they're using clinician, but I don't think that's a clinician. So we said, okay. And we met with one of the providers who may be in the room, and they asked for a report, like, hey, you just provided this training. What are your findings? And so Jesse, who's the president of the company, he was like, look, I find it kind of irresponsible and maybe even a liability that you have these people treating, receiving, handling, overseeing these people that have these serious mental illness or these issues they're dealing with, but they're not really sure what the heck's going on. And that to me is a huge disconnect. And so they were like, I think some people maybe got adjusted away and shifted. But what we learned was we need to add more time. So that's how they asked for a 3-day, and we started doing the 3-day. That became the most training we've done in the state of Iowa over the last 2 years has been for your population, not law enforcement. And also, to throw more shade their way, I have always been bothered by the fact, because here's the reality. You know why in the last 2 months or whatever we haven't done a training in Iowa? because the things are shifting right now, and now PCA is in charge of stuff, whatever, and maybe there's a future opportunity. But the fact that police departments have never bought any of it has always been a problem. They're the benefactors, but who's paying for it? The regions were always paying for it. The regions, the MHDS regions, were ponying up all this money because they realized if we have a care continuum, they happen to be a part of it. So yeah, why don't you come and get all this free training? And they'll argue it's not free, we have to backfill and pay overtime. And so what did some of the CEOs do? They were paying the police departments and the sheriff's offices to fill that overtime so that they could come get the training. And I was like, they don't have enough skin in the game here. Because still, if we were to do a training free, they're not going to show up unless it's forced on them because of what Lori brought up. Like, I don't need that. I don't need that hug-a-thug stuff. Well, cool. Until they go through it and they realize, whoa, that wasn't what I thought it was. That was really beneficial. So I want to throw shade at law enforcement for not investing in this. They'll buy some tactical gear and a new 18-wheeler and a new dog before they're going to buy like mindset mental health training, wellness, resiliency, suicide prevention. And then to your exact question, yes, you all, I don't want to say in this state more than others because I truly think you could benefit from it everywhere, but the social workers, behavioral health clinicians, and I think this should be really looked at, and I know some universities are doing this now, but not all. When you look at a social work program, I really think co-response and crisis work needs to be more implemented into it, not just like learning the DSM and like how to triage and diagnose and treat and all that stuff. It's like, no, how do I respond to their environments? And safety is a huge factor, right? So these aren't people scheduling appointments and showing up at your decored office. You're going into their environment, in their worlds, and I've met a lot of clinicians that are just oblivious to like doing scans, reading the bumper stickers on cars, looking at things in the window, looking at flags. What does the house smell like when they open the door? And you're like, this is not going to be a good time. All of that stuff goes into the totality. And they're just like, it's like a paramedic. They see the person, they come in, when we started co-training with paramedics in San Antonio, we learned a lot from them, just as they learned a lot from us. They walk in with their box, they go take a knee, they put a hand on the patient, they start doing vitals. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Dude, there's paraphernalia, there's a knife, there's all this stuff around. Like, hold on a second. Why don't we like sanitize the environment? And they're like, oh, we just focus on the patient. I'm like, yeah, but the patient's going to kill you if they're psychotic and you're not paying attention to your environment. So we had to learn from them also about like the patient side of approach, focusing on the person. That was great. But then safety is also important too. And I think with social workers and clinicians, especially as we're getting to this rhetoric of like, all police need to be removed from mental health. Like, police shouldn't be responding to mental health calls. I love utopia too, but we're so far from that. And so we need to train the people that actually are responding to it. And your population fits the bill for sure. But thank you for that.
I have a follow-up. Because I think a lot of the training that you guys did, I think, was our crisis responders for the most part when you're talking about that. But remind me, because I don't think we ever made it to the hospitals, for instance, right? I think about those nurses that you talk about meeting in the emergency room where you've done all the pre-work when you picked somebody up, and then you're met with somebody in an emergency room that's like, another Tuesday.
That has been the number one frustration for me, Marissa, in the 8 years of being here, is we could never get into. And so, in fact, true story, when we first started out here, I don't know if anyone's familiar with EMTALA. Okay, some yes, some no. So the Emergency Medical Treatment Active Labor Act, we were told, like, as we are being paid, do not talk about EMTALA, do not teach the cops about EMTALA, you're not allowed to talk about it. And I was like, well, EMTALA like really changed the landscape in San Antonio, because I didn't know this when we first started, but we would bring a patient to an ED. ED's like meeting us at the door, like, what insurance do you have? And they're like, I don't have insurance. Like, oh, we can't take you. And as a dumb cop, I was like, okay, I guess we'll go somewhere else. Let's try the next place. And we just kept going around until someone would receive us. Had no idea that was a violation until we learned about it. So then once we learned and they tried it, and I was just like, hey, can I just get your name and your the physician on duty's name, just because I think this is an EMTALA violation. Not only did they quickly change, they started offering snacks. And like, hey, are you hungry? And so it's the equivalent of the indictment.
Really important word.
Very important. And again, we would teach the cops too, it'd be like threatening someone with an indictment. Like, don't threaten it, but also don't let them take advantage of you either. And so when that hospital we filed 2 EMTALA violations on them, they actually built an entire psychiatric assessment wing to the ED. They had their own office for the officers to come in. They became our biggest supporters after 2 violations. It sucks that it has to get to that point, but education is powerful when people actually understand it. And so, yeah, the fact that in 8 years, we never could really, and we asked, we were like, hey, to the CEOs, like, what about the hospitals? Can we talk to the hospitals? Like, Another true story. We were doing one of the jobs in a place doesn't matter, and they said, I said, hey, we need to bring the hospital to the table, doing a consulting job. Let's bring the hospital to the table. And they said, hey, could you give us a year? And I was like, why? And they're like, wow, we're not getting along right now. And I said, look, you don't pay me to manage your emotions. You're paying me to help your system improve. Like, I don't care about the ego stuff, like, figure it out, but like, they need to be at the table if we're gonna actually improve the system. We need the hospitals as part of this. And they just wouldn't do it. And it's like, as a consultant, you don't get to control everything. So yeah, it was very, very frustrating. I wish the hospitals were more involved. I wish they were more aligned. I wish, especially on the receiving, the ED part, that staff, they really need to have the training of what they're dealing with when people are coming in. It's important. Thank you, Marcy.
I just actually wanted to kind of put a plug in for this because you came and trained a lot of the law enforcement on Eastern Iowa side, as well as a lot of our co-responders. And I actually just got asked this week, what the heck happened and when is that coming back? And I said, you know what, I'll keep you posted, guys.
She's not a plant. She is not a plant. I don't know that woman. I don't know who she is, but no, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So this question is for Joe. So I'm going to tell a little story, and then I have a follow-up question. My career's all been focused and dedicated to mental health and substance abuse. And a year and a half ago, and I'm not going to out the town that this happened in, but a year and a half ago, we lost my baby cousin to the police shooting him. He was 24 years old. Suffered from a schizophrenia diagnosis. And instead of being angry for a long time, we were obviously very angry with the outcome because we felt that it could have been a different outcome, right? I quickly turned to our family and said that this is a clear example as to why our police officers need to be trained, right? And I love to hear you say that there's room for that empathy, right? You can be a person in power or a person that, is to protect, but also have empathy. And so, until that landed on our doorstep, we as a family did not realize that that was happening all across our state, right? And I want to just make it clear, I very much value and respect our police officers, right? But I agree that there's a lot of education to do. But my question is for some of these tougher, small rural communities, where these sergeants and officers just won't do it. I mean, you can't even get a conversation in. So my question for you is that as a family member that has experienced this, what would be the best way to go about that so that we can start creating that movement, right? And getting officers to just agree to have a conversation so we can start the dialogue so we can move forward.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your cousin or nephew.
It would be my cousin's.
Your cousin.
So my second
Yeah.
cousin, yeah.
Sorry to hear about what happened. Honestly, the thing that I think needs to happen is Iowa as a state needs to catch up with most of the country when it comes to laws and specifically requirements. So just for reference, as I mentioned in my talk, you all have a 1-hour annual mental health training requirement in police here. Just so you know, where we come from in San Antonio, our academy, our academy is almost 8 months long, by the way. We get full 40 hours of mental health training in the academy. Then after you have 2 years on the street, you get another 40 hours of training of mental health. And then because we have licensure tiers, we have basic, intermediate, advanced, and master level. If you want to go from immediate to advanced or master, you have to go through another 40-hour CIT training, which has a different code. And it's the Sandra Bland Act, is a woman that died in custody in a jail in Texas. So our officers, 90+% of our San Antonio police officers, and there's 2,700 of us, are getting 120 hours of mental health training in the first 7 years. In the state of Iowa, they go to ILEA. Now, Des Moines PD does their own thing, Cedar Rapids PD does their own thing, and then the rest is ILEA. And at ILEA, I mean, I was grateful because we were providing the training there too, but it was still, all they could allocate was 2.5 days. And so, and when I was frustrated because they were calling it CIT, and I said, stop calling it CIT. CIT is very specifically 40 hours. That is not CIT training. We'll call it Introduction to Mental Health. We'll call it whatever you want to call it, but stop calling it CIT, because these officers are now going back to their agency saying, I have CIT training. No, you don't. You don't. And then I get their chief or sheriff saying, hey, Joe, can you send me a certificate for this officer? They said they're CIT trained. They went at ILEA. They don't have a CIT certificate because they didn't go through CIT training. And so there's a huge disconnect on even understanding, one, what CIT is, two, what the actual requirements are. But I think this is a legislation issue in this state. Part of why, and I was meaning that when I said it, it's been great for us because we haven't had to deal with all of the nonsense that we deal in every other state to get any type of business. But honestly, like from a law enforcement standards and education, right? Texas has their own because Texas thinks it's its own continent. So Texas has TCOL, which is the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Education. There's the standard national one is POST, which is like Police Officer Standards and Training. So there's a governing body that says you have to have this type of training, this level of training by these certain benchmarks. Iowa just doesn't have that much. It's their ILEA, their basic training, and then like, again, such low standards after that. When you're like watching Law and Order and checking that off, like that's a problem. And so I think from a legislative standpoint, there needs to be a mandate, because then like your feelings don't matter. If this is part of the job expectation, you're going to go to this training. You can show up pissed off all you want, but that's what, and then I would say that's the first part. The second part then is, and again, I'm not trying to sit here and just like, whatever company does this training needs to be damn good at challenging those people that are coming in closed off, that are mad about it, that are sitting there like, what are you going to teach me? You know, I'm crusty and old and cool. Like, I'm very effective at like touching them in their feels appropriately with consent. But like, because it's such an important piece. Like, you can show up closed off and shut down all you want, but like if you have a very high quality product that is going to address the individual, that's going to get them thinking introspectively, that's going to challenge them to be like, why are you such a D right now in this class? Like, what's your problem? And then get them to really reflect on it. And we teach them classes that are going to help them out. And then you see the transformation in 1 week's time or in 3 days' time for clinicians because they come in slightly higher IQ. But like in 3 to 5 days' times, we see these transformations happen, right? You see it, and it's a powerful thing. But I think legislation needs to happen, and then once the mandate's there, it needs to be high-quality training that are actually going to create influence. One of the things that's important to us, like we say no to business if I know that this is just a check the box. Like if you're just like trying to get a political win here and be like, oh, we did some training, but you don't care about outcomes, I don't want to do it. We care about behavior change. And if you're not focused on behavior change and implementation and sustainability, then go find someone else. There's plenty of training companies out there, but I truly, like, we integrate, we involve ourselves because we don't want to just come, you know, do our thing and leave. We'd rather land and expand. And so, yeah, I appreciate you sharing the personal story, and that's how it's only going to get better here is we need to legislate for actual higher improvements and standards for training, and then you have to actually deliver on that.
My second question in addition to that is, what about hospitals? Do you offer, because I just want to share, you know, to this room, because we never know whose doorstep this may land on, right? We never thought it happened in our family. Was how we were treated in the hospital setting, right? So when someone dies this way, it's now an ongoing investigation. When we walked in, families coming in from all over, right? We have a strong presence of police hanging out in the lobby. Not the sight someone wants to see when someone has now just died because of that, right? So the other piece to this, again, it's not your traditional experience when someone dies this way, is that they kept referring a pastor, mind you. So I think there's room for some education in that world too, because they kept referring to to him as a body. The body's in here. And so I remember my other cousin's husband looked at the pastor and said, you know, his name is Tyler, right? And so I think there's a lot of education that can be done across the state in all avenues and aspects because, you know, when you're dealing with something like that in such a high intensity situation, we need empathy and understanding.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen the show The Pit on Max, but it really portrays well. So here's real quick what happens. Just like in a lot of professions in this room, nurses get into nursing school because they want to help people. They truly do. They have a heart for people. Then you go get hired your first job and you realize very quickly that hospital is a system. It's a for-profit system most likely, and EBITDA matters. And so bottom lines matter. And they're like, look, I get you want to sit here and do patient care and you like have all this, you want to like talk to them and get to know their story. We don't care about that. In San Antonio, when I was on the department, I would go to all these, it was called Community Medical Director Roundtable meetings, the second Tuesday of every month. And I would sit with hospital CEOs and they would say things like, I don't know why I'm getting these suicidal people in my EDs that are just sad because whatever bad thing happened. He said, our beds are meant to be flipped every 3 hours. If we're not flipping our beds in the ED every 3 hours, we're losing money. So either admit them upstairs or get them out. And so that's the mindset. And I'm like, damn, if the public knew what was happening right now, right? But then at the same time, I will be honest with you, as a business owner, I don't love it, but I can appreciate the fact that like for them to keep their doors open, they have to honor the fact that the system is set up in a way that like the only way they're going to get paid or reimbursed is by delivering a service. And so if I know I can't treat this person or this person's not going to make money for me, then like I can only have empathy for so long. And just as policing, what I refer to as, especially in the emergency departments, especially if it's a level 1 trauma, especially with things like that, is that we have become saturated in human suffering. Like we truly are. And so we are so desensitized to just what is a very traumatic moment for you and your family is a Tuesday for that entire staff. And they're just lost on it because it happened yesterday, it happened last night, it happened twice on Saturday. And so they're so used to seeing it that they're almost unable to empathize because they've learned how to protect themselves, which really means they've just learned how to suppress and compress that emotion, which is only repressed. And that's why they have a lot of the same issues that public safety has, which is higher drinking, higher divorce rates, higher addiction to pornography, higher, all of these issues that come from it because we become so desensitized in the work we do that we falsely seek dopamine, and we're going to only get that dopamine from doing maladaptive coping strategies. And so when that's the thing, it's a serious problem. And the problem is you have people like yourself and your family that are having the worst moment of your life, and you're confronted by people that seemingly do not care at all. And we would get in trouble all the time as cops. We show up on a major motor vehicle fatality with a death, and the news is just doing their panning, and they see 2 cops laughing. They're not laughing at the death. They're having a sidebar conversation. This is just another call for them. But because we're just trying to survive the moment, we get jammed up because it's like, oh, that looks bad. This was someone's family. You guys are laughing. The story is then you're laughing at the death. And it's like, no. We're just trying to survive here. And people don't care. And until you do these types of jobs and work, it's really hard to empathize with the other side. So I'm very careful about judgment, and I'm way more curious. And I say, if I'm in that situation or if I have been, how would I deal with that situation? How can I get better? Because telling someone to do anything different is going to be very hard, but demonstrating what you actually do and leading by example instead of being a leader through your lips is always going to land more effectively. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Pastoral care, every Iowa 360 is a real thing. High V, it doesn't matter. Like everyone needs it because people are in crisis and we need it now more than ever. But thank you for that, Roxanne. I appreciate it.
I'm probably not going to say this the best way, but I guess for me it's, I'd like to ask Eric maybe to start, but what about the family side of this? And training isn't the right way to say that, but helping families to understand the whole processes and what they can do. I think the trainings are great for the people that are all interacting with that stuff, but what can we do with families to help them have more awareness, understand all of these things that are happening and how they deal with it? So.
Thank you for your question. I would actually defer to Leslie on this because there are a lot of I know this because I collaborated with Treatment Advocacy Center for many, many years. Leslie and Treatment Advocacy Center are a reason that anybody knows who I am. And there very much are families who call in on a regular basis. I know this because I used to be one of the people responding to the emails and the calls. But there are things to be done. One, for the families to be heard, because at some point, people are calling towards the beginning of a crisis, or if they've never experienced it before. Sometimes they don't know what to do, what's there to support them policy-wise. And if something is not there to support them policy-wise, that is something else the Treatment Advocacy Center excels at when it comes down to serious mental illness and AOT. So if your question is like, what can we do to educate others more? In the context of SMI and anesthesia, TAC is got to be, like, if you're making like a top 3 list, like TAC is definitely on that. I am with the Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance. We also do a lot of work. In fact, in DC just a couple of months ago, we had people fly in from all over the United States. Most of them, I want to say, actually, were parents or caregivers or family members. There were doctors there. There were judges there. There were others who were there, but most of the folks who came there that I got a chance to meet identified themselves as family members or caregivers to those living with some sort of SMI. And that was a wonderful event for people to get together and not just network, powwow, and like sing kumbaya about like, oh, we're here for each other, but truly as an educational effort. And then to take that to the next level, on the end of day 2, we then went to Capitol Hill where we had a planned legislative briefing where we got to talk, not just with those who were already in attendance for the event, but the lawmakers had reps there on Capitol Hill listening to the family members after the end of that legislative briefing. So anybody, whether it's you or anyone else asking, like, where's a great place to start for if we need to educate others or get help or push policy and make it better than what it currently is anywhere around the U.S., 2 names come to mind, and it's the one, TAC, which Leslie is with, and also where I'm at. I don't even think that I need to advertise for Joe here at this point. I think it's very clear the value that Joe brings. So if anyone wants help in any way whatsoever, I think the value is already seen there. But are you already familiar with Leslie? I don't know. Oh, well, then I don't know why I said all that then.
Yeah, I just want to add also the NAMI family to family class. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not going to solve the problem for their loved one, but it's going to help the family to learn so much more and process all of the ambiguous loss that they're experiencing from their loved one getting so sick. So yes, and there are many organizations that are working to beef up how much family support they're providing. TAC has an enormous amount of information on the website. NAMI Iowa, local NAMI affiliates, get them connected to other families. It's critically important, and even if the only thing you do is hand them a book on whatever the diagnosis is, that is so much better than most of what we got, which was nothing.
And I'll just add one quick thing is, because I was going to say NAMI, but this is where, if I was in charge of all things, it would be mandatory that every American citizen has to take 8 hours of mental health first aid before they graduate high school or get a driver's license or get a first job or whatever. If we just had a basic baseline understanding of mental health, I truly think 911 calls would go significantly down because people would have a better understanding and grasp of what they're seeing. But even families, like it's, you know, just as Eric shared his story, like his family didn't know or understand what was happening as he's developing this diagnosis. And so they're at just much of a loss. And it's like, it was sad to me in San Antonio when, for some families, because the way the systems are set up, that it was almost better for the individual to get arrested on a petty charge because we could leverage that with probation through the specialty courts, through the mental health court. And that court only had like a 6% recidivism rate, which tells you that when they're in treatment, that they're actually going to do really well. You're not going to get that type of result in a criminal court. And so, but the fact that they had to catch a charge to get that level of care and influence it sucks. But yes, NAMI family is huge. And then, yeah, I would say look into mental health first aid. At this point, you can find pretty much everything online. And honestly, I don't want to offend anyone here, but like, even if you're not using AI, like there are massive advancements right now in AI. There's a thing called Ear Kick, and I don't belong to them. I did have a podcast with their owner, but it's free, and it's basically it's an AI level-rated private therapist in your pocket. It's an app, and you can put in whatever you're dealing with, struggling with, and it's going to give you trauma-informed clinical level feedback without diagnosing. But if you're just feeling alone and isolated, like leverage the tools that are there for us. I know our energy people are like, AI is bad. It can be bad, but you know what? It's not going away, and so why not be on the right side of it? But AI is an incredible opportunity to think about as well. Ear Kick is one of the apps. There's many of them, but that's a free resource.
So I have another question. Commitment is at front of mind for a lot of folks here in Iowa, and it's because our commitment code hasn't been looked at in a really, really long time. And along the way from both of you, I heard that Texas has done some really interesting things in your commitment law. And so as I'm thinking about it, and we have a lot of folks in the room today that have some space, I think, that overlaps in those commitment spots. If either of you has anything to tell us about how maybe Texas got some of that work to move, for instance, and really started to create, because you're going to have to create collaborative effort in order to move commitment law. We have a lot of interest. And so just curious if either of you has some insight for us about how to make it go.
So earlier you heard Leslie mention about, she was referring to SB 1164 in Texas, which meant that as of September 1st of this year, anosognosia is something that was formally added as language as a reason someone could be brought into treatment without a mental health warrant. Now, I can tell you, I was very excited about this when this happened because it would have been hugely beneficial for my family and I many years ago. And I was grateful that that this happened because I just see all of the turmoil that my family and families like ours could have avoided. Now, what made me sad was after the story was posted on KTRK, which is Houston's local ABC affiliate, I was soaked. Like, they included me in the story, they interviewed me, got my responses, and as soon as it was posted online, I was like, wow, I can't wait to read what people have to say about this. And I'm estimating here, but probably 95% of it were people who were just outraged at the prospect. But it wasn't because they were outraged because they understood. They were outraged based from a place of misunderstanding and fear, some of it justified by some of the things going on in the news. Texas, geographically speaking, is not too far from Mexico. And there is huge national concern right now about the prospect of law enforcement detaining individuals. And so this was largely seen by some groups as this is just one more way now that law enforcement can just take somebody in and say, oh, anosognosia. And that's just not how things are done. And I wish that people could understand that's the case. I mean, I would defer to Joe for what I'm about to say, but if any police officer that you know of when you were on the force was like, oh, this person had anosognosia and whatever, you brought him in, is that where it would end, especially if that person had like no mental health crisis whatsoever, didn't belong there, or is that fear misplaced? And that's why I want to pass it on.
Yeah, and so the answer is no, that is not where it would end. That would be like, oh, first level of concern. The other thing that I would say to that, Marissa, is with our mental health law, we actually got with the judges to get interpretation on what does this mean? Because, and I saw it in Eric's presentation or even Leslie's presentation, is the danger to self and others is such a played out thing that everyone just throws out. Even, again, the hospitals we keep talking about. They're just like, are you suicidal? No. Do you want to kill anyone else? No. So what's the point? Well, there's a whole big third criteria that exists. And the third criteria is this big gray matter where there's a lot of open for interpretation of what people are going to say or think about it. And I will tell you that as a mental health officer in San Antonio, 85% of my hospitalizations that I would transport people for was third criteria. And in Iowa, that doesn't seem to be the case at all because it's nah, they have to be suicidal and I'm like, no, they really don't. We just need a better understanding of the actual law and then have people backing us up when we're actually going to put our foot down and say, this person meets the criteria based on this. And I've got Judge so-and-so's backing that supports this, saying that this person, because of X, Y, and Z, is a danger to themselves. They're just not aware of it, whether it's anosognosia language or not. But if I'm floridly psychotic, detached from reality, haven't bathed in 6 days, haven't eaten in 2, I think it's Tuesday, March 3rd, 1974, and I'm just walking around my house trying to eat the microwave, that person needs a hospital, right? And there are some people that will show up and be like, well, I can't do anything. And it's well, and this is what we teach law enforcement. Here's the metric. If you leave this person, and assuming no one's going to come back and talk to them, see them again, in 24 hours, are they going to be better or worse than they are right now? And if the answer is worse even a little, they need intervention. You can't leave them there. And too many times people are getting left, and it's well, because I don't understand the law or I don't understand the code, and 229 is that's a lawyer thing. We don't really deal with those. I know Ed Thomas, but if it's not Ed Thomas, then I'm not sure. And this was the biggest benefit, in my opinion, because San Antonio didn't have a true co-responder model, but we had embedded clinicians. Because we were 2 officers, because we had the staff for it, 2 officers to a car, we had a clinician in a chase car, but they had a very specific role, 42 people for each one of our clinicians for case management. And they, because of the relationships with the hospitals, and sometimes with the consent of the person, we would get them to sign waivers if they were lucid enough to do it, to be a part of the treatment plan, just saying, hey, will you notify us when they're going to get discharged so that we can follow up? We're going to follow up within 24, we're going to follow up at a week, we're going to follow up at 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months. And as long, and the clinician was doing all that without us, as long as there was no threat. And as long as they're, and most of that was like delivering medication, transporting to appointments, just helping them. And then at 6 months, if they hit all those things, then it's like, hey, they're good to go. They fall off the radar, move on to the next one. But it was an understanding how to best utilize resources, how to best understand the law. And I was shocked coming here of like how few of the third criteria transportations were happening. It was just so hands off of like, no, they have to be suicidal or very clearly homicidal. And I'm like, it's just not true, but they're so afraid to touch it. Leslie, you look like you want to add.
Yeah, I want to ask you a loaded question. I'm going to be really honest about that because obviously I was pushing for an improvement in our commitment law this year. Would you agree that helping somebody sooner as they're starting to deteriorate helps to limit the amount of damage in the brain and limit the adverse consequences? And second part of the question is, the population of patients who need hospitalized isn't going to increase. It's just going to help us to help them sooner.
Yeah, love the loaded question, and I would agree with you. It would be hard for me to like truly answer the first and claim to be like a psychiatrist and be like, yes, 12% intervention shorter, but it's obvious to assume that yes, early intervention is going to help the brain further decompensate or less decompensate. And to Eric's point, and I love that he brought it up, it's so rare, and we know this in this room, but it's so rare that the first time, the first point of intervention, goes to a hospital, gets the first medication, and like, aha, magic sauce, we found the cure, we're good. It's very rare that that happens, right? Just on the substance use side, with detox and sobering, it's like it takes 10 before you're going to get them converted to 1. And so oftentimes it takes years, 2 years, 3 years to find the right medication regimen with the right plan to get it going. I am a huge fan of, and in Texas, the 3 people that can do it, to do the involuntary commitments, were police, a judge, and a parent or guardian, because they could basically commit their own children without law enforcement. And so those are the only 3 people that could do it. So a lot of the advocates were like, well, we don't think law enforcement should have this criteria. Look, all we're doing is bringing them to the decision maker, because the hospital could receive them and be like, yeah, you don't meet our standards, so we're going to discharge you now. Cool. No hard feelings. No one has ever been successfully sued in the state of Texas, no cop, for bringing someone to a hospital against their will, trying to help them, because they have to articulate why they're worried. And so again, that was most of what I was doing. Because we were a specialty unit, we didn't get the easy calls. We were getting the difficult, time-consuming ones. And so we'd show up, we'd do all this work, but most of them were people that were decompensated. Most of it was third criteria. So we got really good at articulating why this person is a danger to themselves or others, why leaving them alone is a danger to society, and why intervening with them right now and getting them potentially into treatment or some level of care is actually going to be the best thing for them. Because otherwise, to your point, yes, we're going to flood the jails, which is exactly what happened. And I think this point matters. Years ago, the Bexar County Jail, where we live in San Antonio, it's 5,000 beds. Our Bexar County Jail is 5,000 beds. We were being sued by the state because we were over capacity. So the sheriff is like, cool, we'll build a bigger jail. We're going to build an annex. This is when we really started getting involved with police and behavioral health together. Gilbert Gonzalez, that was working with Kazin and all these, Judge Polly Spencer, they came together and they said, hold on, what if we actually looked at who's in the jail? This was like the birth of jail diversion in Bexar County. And they said, if we look at who's in the jail, knowing that people that have a serious mental illness on small misdemeanor offenses, nonviolent, stay in jail 5 times longer than a violent offender, because a violent offender has resources to get out, but this person that has a serious mental illness does not, they're going to stay in jail 5 times longer. If we actually look at treatment, could we actually reduce the amount of people in jail? Wouldn't you know it, that jail still sits at 5,000 beds, and unless they do the warrant roundup once a year, which they typically do around rodeo and fiesta, so avoid San Antonio March. But that jail sits at 1,000 empty beds still, consistently, because of our jail diversion initiatives. At the magistrate, when we come in, there's a rubber stamp on the back of it. We have to ask the 3 questions. It goes into a bin. There's a whole process now. Pre-booking diversion. And there's also deflection that happens in the field because of the training, where it's like, yeah, this person committed a misdemeanor, but if it's nonviolent, we have the authority, the autonomy as police officers to talk to whoever the complainant is and say, hey, listen, we know this person, they have a mental illness. Would you be okay if we just brought them to treatment instead of filing this charge on them? They're like, oh yeah, no, if they're sick and you're actually gonna help them, I'm fine with that. Cool, we can do that in the field in real time. But because of our collaborative efforts of working to do these things, but I absolutely agree with you, I get the other side of it where people are like scared of law enforcement having more power, but if they have proper training and you have the right people in the right positions, and maybe it's not every cop, but you have to go through, this is a policy thing, but it's like all cops get the training, but only this unit gets to make this decision. There's ways to mitigate that. But I think that would be super vital to getting people help much faster, to get them in much sooner, to start that trend knowing it's gonna be 3 to 5 to 10 before we actually get to maybe completely change their life as happened with Eric.
Okay, this could continue and continue on for the rest of the night, but
Dinner
I
will be here
apologize
soon.
we've
Let's
gone
roll.
over, but what's that?
Dinner's going to be here soon. Let's keep going. Shout out to the remaining 50 of you that are here, though. I'm going to clap for you. Well done, guys. Well done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Joe.
Laura.
Thank you, Eric, so much. I wish we could clone you and just keep you here in Iowa because we could definitely use your voices. So thank you guys so much for coming here the first day. Hopefully it was good. I had to have a question. Julie, I saw your email to me. So we are going to be putting the PowerPoints. We're continuing to add them as we can get them uploaded. So you'll see those on the website. And tomorrow we'll start at 8:30. We've got Dr. Hess, Dr. Clemens, myself, Michelle O'Brien doing some sequential intercept mapping or modeling, and then we'll do our action planning till about 12:15. Thanks, guys.